Well, we're just going to make it work. Oh, there we go. There we go. I will stop yelling for you now. So everyone who wants to come in now is late for class. And you're all on time. So we're going to get started. We're going to talk about the Cloud Adoption Framework. Title says it all. Before we dive in and before I introduce myself, I want to get a feeling of why you people are here. So some of the expectations. Because the Cloud Adoption Framework has two sides. It has the people that are responsible for it, for the platform, and the people who are using landing zones. So who here is already responsible for Cloud Adoption Frameworks or has built them? All right, cool, cool. Who is like a user of the Cloud Adoption Framework, has a landing zone? And are you all wondering like what are all these rules for? And I want to get into the conversation with our technical staff. Yeah. And who is here to think like, why would the Cloud Adoption Framework be useful for me and is not using it now? Oh, someone? Why aren't other people here? What did I miss? Is there someone who's like, I'm here for another reason, something I want to find out? Or just for my entertainment, because you know that my sessions are always really alive and stuff like that? No? No one? All right. We're going to dive in. Before we do, let me introduce myself. My name is Barbara Forbes. I am the field CTO at OGD, and we are an IT service provider in the Netherlands. And I am an Azure MVP and a GitHub star, and I have worked as a consultant beforehand, and I have seen a lot of Cloud Adoption Framework adoptions, and I've seen it gone wrong a few times, and what better than to learn from the mistakes that other people have made. So let's dive in. First, what are we talking about? What does the Cloud Adoption Framework offer? By the way, the tech people, the time has not started here. I don't know if it's possible to start that, because otherwise I'm going to be late. There's a timer here, and I actually need that. All right, and I don't want you people to be late for lunch, but not going to happen? All right, it's going to be a bit of a gamble, people. Just yell at me when you're like, we're hungry. Get going. So what does the Cloud Adoption Framework offer? I got this directly from the documentation. Eliminate common failure points for cloud transformation. Sounds good, right? And I was like, this is kind of meta, because what we're doing here is talking about the common failure point when you're using the Cloud Adoption Framework. Because some reason I see all people using it kind of making the same mistakes. So let's drive back. What is the promise of the Cloud Adoption Framework? Now, this used to be the center promise of the Cloud Adoption Framework. It's not anymore, but I still really love this metaphor, because this is one of the things that you get in a technical implementation. What we used to have in an on-prem environment, who here have an on-prem environment with the old servers and been responsible for that? And then the difficult question, who still is responsible for that kind of environment? Brilliant, we're all in the cloud, we're all in the future. I love that, I have never had that happen. So take a moment for all the poor people not in this session who still have to do it the old ways. So we would have basically the IT team who was responsible for keeping all the servers running, and then all the developers had their own little server that they could use, and there were the platform engineers were mostly like a policeman in the middle, telling everyone what they could do. It would slow down operations, it would cause a lot of frustration. And what we get now is a roundabout. And with a roundabout, you don't have to wait for one person to tell you whether it's green or red. You get guidelines so that you know which way you can go, and you can move around all the other people. So you get freedom, delegated responsibility, but it's still all secure and safe. There's just one problem here. Do people know how to use a roundabout? And this is a cultural thing, but I always have to show this one because it's so fitting. This is what happens with roundabouts. People have no clue how to use them if you don't tell them. If you don't believe this, look at these kind of images or go on Reddit and see how they treat roundabouts in the US. They don't have a lot of roundabouts in the US, so if there's one there, people get confused, and then you see what will happen. I don't know how it's here. I know in the Netherlands there's a roundabout around every corner. And we even have systems to make them easier to navigate for us, stuff like that. But by default, people no clue how to run a roundabout, and that's the first mistake we make. All right, back to the basic. What is the cloud adoption framework? This is the old description that was on the documentation. So you go to the documentation, Cloud Adoption Framework, and it says this is proven guidance and best practices that help you confidently adopt the cloud and achieve business outcomes. And I love this. It's like, yeah, this is what we need. We don't know what it is, but we need this kind of stuff. They've changed this. It's now this. Proven guidance to be successful in Azure. We're not going to fix your company for you. We're not going to make your life better or shinier or anything like that, but we're going to create some nice Azure for you. And that's basically how a lot of people are actually using the Cloud Adoption Framework, to create some really nice Azure. This is basically all the steps for the Cloud Adoption Framework. We define a strategy, we plan it, we try to get ready, and we start adopting. On the way, we secure, manage, and govern. And we can make mistakes at any step of these. One of the first things we're going to find is a problem is that there's so much documentation out there. So I have a screenshot. This is the documentation, aka.ms/caf. And I made a screenshot running through all the menus, which are not all opened, to be like, how can I make the point of how much documentation this is? How much information is out there? And then I saw this button. Challenge accepted. Let's see. 1,320 pages. So if you just read all that, then you're in charge of the Cloud Adoption Framework. Now there is a funny thing here, and that is that I have done this session or sessions like these for quite a while, and a few years ago there was a lot more documentation. It was 3,600 pages. There's only a third left, which makes this slide a lot less convincing, for one. And I tried to check what happened. So I checked in the history, like what happened. One of the things I believe is that they somehow heard my talk and decided, hey, we might have too much documentation. That's the good scenario. I also found out they removed a lot of the images. And I love images. And I was like, why would you remove them? And they actually explained it somewhere in the documentation. It's to be able to update stuff quicker, because Azure changes quickly. So, okay, that's a really good point. And it's because our little AI friends that we have over here are better with text than with images. So, all right, fair enough. The good news is I have a lot of the images still in this presentation, so you're going to get a shot into history. I think a lot of them are still very useful for your own journey, to say it like that. All right, so first lesson, don't start with all that documentation. You don't need anything, all of it. And what we're going to do now is go beyond those docs. So the first step of that Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, we are going to define a strategy. This means that we need to decide, why do we actually want to move to Azure? And you wouldn't believe how many people skip this step, where it's no clue, why do we want the cloud? There are so many reasons to want to go to the cloud. Like, I think everyone is working in the cloud. Who knows why the company moved into the cloud, for your own company? Who can throw out the reason? Anyone? Yeah? Scalability is a really good one. I heard this from another speaker. The sound is horrible, but I'm going to run to you if I have to. So scalability is a really good one. The scalability in Azure is something you will never achieve in your own data center. What could be another reason? I'm going to run to you because I have no clue what you said. Security. Security, awesome. Security in Azure, especially with Enter ID and with the current development, again, something's really hard to match in your local environment. I'm going to shout another one for myself. Things as cost management could also be a thing. The flexibility that comes with Azure. And I actually have a picture of this. So this is no longer in the Cloud Adoption Framework, so it's now exclusive content. We can save costs. We can make it less complex. We can do optimization. Maybe we want to go worldwide. Could also be something. So maybe you will have another business on the other side of the world. Azure is better than a local environment. It could be migration, it could be innovation, where you want to be part of the latest technology that's available. Maybe you want Azure AI, because everything is AI now. There's barely any AI in this talk, I'm really proud of it. There's a lot of reasons, and they're all very, very valid. The thing is, everyone needs to agree what the reason is. Because if the people who are actually going to use Azure have no clue why they're moving to Azure, they're not going to be motivated. You know what one person is who will be a problem if he doesn't know why this is happening? The CFO. This is going to cost a lot of money. And if he has no clue why we're doing this, then halfway through the project, he's going to say, why are we doing this? This seems like lost money. Throw it out, let's quit, and you have a half-formed Azure environment. And I've seen it happen all the time. So you need to be clear on why you are actually doing it. And let's get real. Half the companies I talk to are not busy with their strategy. They just start building stuff because they're like, hey, we have the technology. Most IT providers do the same thing. They're like, hey, I can deploy the cloud adoption framework for you. Here's all the code. Strategy, what we're talking about. And I have heard this from several companies, and I'm allowed to say it because I have done it myself. Be like, here, I have the technical stuff for you, so we're already building stuff, not thinking about the strategy and why we're doing stuff. And we often start with that very, very fragile legacy workload. So there's a workload somewhere in a data center, and whoever wrote the code has long retired and is long gone, and that's the first workload we're going to do. You know what we call that? Setting yourself up for failure. You know it's going to fail. The other workload I often see is that they say, yeah, we need a cloud adoption framework because we have some people who are going to write an application that we have been waiting for a long time, and we need Azure resources. Well, that will be a very relaxing migration. So you need to get back to the bigger picture and be like, hey, this is what we actually need. So to bring it all together, strategy isn't about the cloud, it's about direction. I have a lot of the inspirational quotes in here to get us all a bit inspired, what we never do when we're around the cloud. It's not just about IT, it's about more than that. All right. We've defined our strategy. We all know why we're going to go to the cloud. And now we're going to plan stuff. So we're going to go to our next step. We need to think about all the processes that we're going to need, what people should be involved, and what technology we're going to use, and how our technical environment is going to look like. Now this is a new part of the cloud adoption framework. This wasn't a part of it beforehand. We can choose between centralized, shared management, and decentralized. Now this is the old situation. We all agreed we didn't want this anymore. So, but it's still now mentioned in the cloud adoption framework. This is an option if it fits your business case. Then we have shared management, which is mostly what we're talking about, the roundabout structure. And if you're like YOLO and let's see how it goes, you can do decentralized where you just say, oh, okay, everyone gets their little piece of Azure and we hope for the best. They say, yeah, this might be good for a startup. I like that this is part of the cloud adoption framework now because let's face it, the whole cloud adoption framework is this. But they now make the mention that it might not be the best solution for everyone. You need to understand why you're specifically choosing that one. All right, so let's assume we've chosen that one, because otherwise we're done with this talk and I still have some time to cover. The next thing we need to do is look at all the application that we already have and define what we want to do with them. And we have 6 R's for that. And what I really love is that they make a really big effort to make sure everything starts with an R, although it doesn't make any sense anymore. But it does all start with an R. So is it better to memorize? No. Do you know what it means now? No, but it does look fancy. It's all starting with the same letter. I feel like there should be more R's out there. Anyway, these are the ones we have now. These were 5 R's, by the way, when I first did this talk. So we even went 1 more R's. And we have rehost, for example. Rehost is lift and shift. That's how we basically call it. You take your server from the data center and you put it into Azure in exactly the same configuration. Now, when I talk to people, I often get the feeling, if I talk about lift and shift, that a lot of people are like, oh, you don't want lift and shift. Just get a feeling, again, people who are working in Azure, you all are, how many are still on a server that is the same like it was in the data center, or have that in your environment? Do you still have that, or are you all using Azure? That seems a bit shameful. This is a very valid way to migrate. We don't like it because you're not using everything Azure that has to offer, but there's often other things we need to consider. And one of the examples is the request I see the most is when people say we want to move to Azure because our hardware is running out of support in 3 months. And we don't feel like replacing it. And the first thing you ask them is, couldn't you have come like a year ago or maybe 5 years ago? But if that's what they want to do, then we're going to lift and shift. And as long as people understand, like, you are not going to get any of the profits of Azure and you do need to change stuff later, as long as people understand, fine, we'll lift and shift everything. So it's very valid. It's not the most shiny, absolutely not. Then we have re-platform, where you basically put it in a platform as a service, so Azure Functions or Azure Web Apps or the SQL databases with minimal code changes. Do you know the re-platform is actually a new one? And I made that little image. The other images are from the old Cloud Adoption Framework documentation, but there's no images and no fun in there anymore. I made that one with Copilot. I think it did it pretty well. That, like, I need something that looks a bit like this. Yeah, I think it's believable until I actually tell it because I'm excited about it. So, all right, re-platform. We basically minimal change and put it through. Then we have refactor, where we actually have to change the code before we can put it into platform as a service. So the Azure services. We have re-architect, where we completely rebuild the architecture around it. So this could be microservices, this could be containers. This is what you use, again, when the developer of the application has retired and no one has any clue how it works. So you put it in a container and hope it doesn't break and doesn't get angry. We have rebuilt, where we're like, okay, this code won't even survive in a container. We need to create a new solution. And then we have retain or replace, which I put into one category, because retain wasn't actually a part beforehand, but this is the Cloud Adoption Framework saying sometimes it's an option to just keep it on-prem. We don't like it, sometimes it's stuff we have to do, but we also have the other option, replace it with something that someone else is hosting. Also not the most fun one from a technical perspective, but from a cost perspective it often is. So we need to decide for every application that we're running and every server that we're running, which strategy we're going to use. And that's something we need to work through. So then we have an image of what we all have. Now the next picture on the next slide is about the people. I want you to forget the image as quickly as you can. I'm going to warn in advance, don't take any pictures, because I included it because I think it's so completely silly. It's no longer in the Cloud Adoption Framework, but this is just for laughter. This was actually an image in the Cloud Adoption Framework, and they thought it makes sense. No, don't take pictures. You don't want to memorize this. This is horrible. You don't want to memorize this stuff. The point behind it is good. The point behind it is to say that, hey, people need to know how Azure works to a certain level. We need some experts, and we need to know people that know how it works. And you know, one that it's kind of in there, but one of the biggest challenges I have seen is getting the network people involved, for example. Network people really have it. Are there network people in the room, by the way? Yeah. Yeah, awesome. I'm going to be honest with you, you have a good reason to have doubts about Azure, because when Azure started out, they said, yeah, we don't need the network anymore. We've got identity. And let's face it, that was 15 years ago. And they're like, oh, okay, we were kind of wrong. We do need the network. I think the most powerful person in the world is a network engineer that knows Azure. And if Azure engineers and network engineers can get together, we can have magic. I'm still trying to make it happen. It's very, very difficult, but we can get some magic over there. Point is, we need to have people in the right places and know what people need to know to work with Azure. And this is the point where we're all like, we're not even in Azure yet. Isn't this like a whole lot of work? Yes, this is a whole lot of work. This is something that's going to take years. This is not something you're going to do in a few months, unless you lift and shift everything. Then you can do it in a few months. You can deploy the basics of the framework in half an hour. That's not the issue. Everything around it. It's going to take time, so we better prepare to have the time in there than be like, oh, we're so surprised. And I see the surprise every time. This is going to take time. And I love this one. You need to take the time to get it right, not just done. It's almost Bob Ross feeling. I love this one. So, we have planned now. We know the strategy. We have planned our environment. And the next thing we're going to do is ready, which is one of my favorite because it's not a verb. We're going to be ready. He readied. We have readied. No clue. We are actually going to build the technical stuff. So this is part where most companies start and which us technical people feel like, okay, this is the most fun. It is the most fun. And what we're going to do is resource management, access management, Azure update management. We are going to build a landing zone. So we're going to create the structure that all the workloads can land on and profit from our cloud adoption framework. Landing zone. This is it. There we go. Any question? This thing is huge. And this is actually a picture that's got a lot bigger in just 2 years. There's so much going on. And this is one of the places where you can get completely lost, have no clue what's going on, or you're like, okay, let's implement everything. Create all the bicep and we'll be fine, and then everything will be solved. Let's take it down a notch. This is better. This we can understand. So what we do when we create the landing zone is we create a structure. We create a structure that we can understand, where we know where everything is and what everything is doing. We have sandboxes, decommissioned landing zones. We have a separate platform where everything we need to manage on the platform. One of the important things I think here is that you look at what you actually need and what is if something is defined here and you're like, I don't need it, don't build it. Don't build management groups because you can. Yeah, they're free, but don't do it because you can, because you're going to confuse yourself. One of my favorite things, though, is the difference between corporate landing zones and online landing zones. And the reason for that is because this is the biggest change from the classical on-prem environment, where we actually do a check. Does a resource need a connection with all the other stuff in the network? Or does it just need to go outside? We could never do that on-prem because everything needed to be connected with the domain controller. And I'm hoping the network people agree with me, but the safest connection is no connection. I have a favorite network engineer that I say we have the safest network, no network at all, and then he gets confused. But it's very secure to not have it connected to anything. So it's one of the things you can do here is make people think about that concept. Do we actually need a connection to anything on-prem? If we have a dedicated database, maybe it can be dedicated right here and it doesn't need to be in any other place. So this is what we start off with. Again, the network, this is just to illustrate. This is how we always say that the network needs to be. A hub and spoke network. We have one centralized position that might be connected to on-prem or not. And from there, everything is connected. And everyone agrees, yeah, this is a good idea. This is what we need. The thing is, this is what is all built around it. There's so much going on here. So this is not as easy as it looks. So there's a lot of resources here. And I think one of the biggest fall that we can have here is the question, are we actually ready? And this is also where we see things go wrong. If you strive to have this all perfect, you're never going to get started. Now, these steps can overlap a little bit, and I have an image on that on the next step, because I think it fits there better. Are we ever ready? If you can get stuck in this phase forever. So you need to move on and find out. And I got another one here. You need to launch small, learn fast, and keep improving. Improve always. And like that, we can go from ready to the next step. and we are finally going to adopt stuff. The first thing I have in adoption is one of my favorite pictures and one of my favorite lessons of the whole cloud adoption framework. And it's not a part of it anymore. But this is still the one I use to convince all my customers on how they should do this. And this is basically the path when you're adopting stuff. And this pretty much works for everything we do. What you do is with the cloud platform, you create a landing zone. You're not going to make it perfect. You're not going to have perfect security or perfect governance. From here, you're going to deploy your first workload. And then you're going to find how you can connect those environments and what is needed for that. And then your first 10 workloads, this does require quite a large business. I don't think it needs to be 10. And then you're going to secure stuff, and suddenly that's the first production workload. I missed the message, but we were still in development. The point is that these are two steps that need to go next to each other. And I have seen too many companies, especially larger ones, where the first step they do is create a cloud center of excellence. Because the experts are like, now this is mine. And all right, it's good, you need to be a cloud center of excellence. But if you don't understand the workloads, you're not going to get a successful cloud environment. You're going to be stuck in that landing zone, or you're going to be stuck on the bottom line with no workloads that actually are running your things. So one of the important lessons here is that they are connected with each other. And yeah, this is no longer in there. I still think this is the biggest message. Anyway, we are adopting stuff now. And we can modernize or migrate. And the fun thing is, if you go to the migrate step in the documentation, it says, first migrate, then modernize. Modernizing is still something you need to do. And that's with the lift and shift, for example. If your company is like, yeah, we're going to throw all the old servers in the cloud, that's the point where you say, okay, but we need to change this stuff because it will run out of date. We need to make a plan, a roadmap to do this in like 2 years, for example. So we can migrate, rehost, or modernize, re-platform. We've got so much alliteration going on with the M's and the R's, and no one knows what it's about because we still need to tell what's actually happening. So, like I said, rehosting, you get all the profit right away. You can get rid of your data center and everything you need to do there, maybe save the cost from there, and you're immediately in the cloud. With modernize, this is going to take some time. For every application, you need to decide what steps do we need to take to make sure this is fit for Azure. Are the people that run the application actually aware of everything that Azure can do? Are they aware of their limitations? It's also something we don't talk about enough, and I'm going a little bit into governance here, but that's what we do. I've seen applications where the developers have everything ready, and they're like, all right, let's throw it in your landing zone thingy, and we'll throw it in there. And then it's like, yeah, but we have governance set up. And you didn't have that in your old environment, so you have to be able to do it with these conditions. All right, back to the drawing table. And it's good to have the governance. It's needed for a larger environment, but this does mean that adoption can be pretty difficult. And if we go back to our roundabout, I still love my roundabout here, we're going to get this question. There's a lot of people who feel like, I don't understand that Azure thing you're talking about. Can you just build me whatever I need to have? I've also seen a lot of workloads work so much better if the platform team and the workload team work together in making the designs, getting everything together. But somehow, yeah, I don't know if it's just our company, I don't think it is, but somehow in IT we tend to be like, this is our little island and we don't want to talk to all the other islands. That's why I'm happy that we have developers and cloud engineers and network engineers and maybe people who don't identify as any of those. Because we need to get together, and that's always so difficult because it becomes a shared responsibility. But I think actually what I see the platform engineers are often, and I say that because I used to be one, they are often like, okay, your landing zone is done, I'm done. And I'm going to go to the next part. And then you're not going to have a successful adoption. Then you're going to have people working around you, not talking with you, stuff like that. Important lesson here, one size fits none. If you just tell everyone they need to be working according to your standards, or even better, to the standards of the cloud adoption framework, then no one's going to profit. So you need to decide on that flexibility, and that's why you don't create the complete landing zones before you're actually unloading workloads, because when you're loading workloads, that's when the trouble comes in. All right, we've adopted everything, we've migrated, modernized, we've innovated, we've done it all, and it feels like we're ready, but along the way, we need to secure stuff, manage stuff, and govern stuff. And this is also one that I often see as, oh yeah, we still need to do that. Yeah, we're gonna do that later. No, this should have started somewhere along the way. After your strategy, you already need to be about security, because we just said the security is one of the benefits that we get of Azure. But the benefit of Azure is that you have the freedom to be very, very insecure. You get a lot of freedom to make this a very, very dangerous situation. So we need to think about that earlier than this. So what we do in this step is create those guardrails. We create that roundabout. We make sure that they cannot slip off the road. And we make sure that everyone understands what a roundabout is. So basically, the goal is to get everyone on there, know who gets to go first, and make sure they don't crash somewhere like we saw in that first image. And we do a few things to do that. We have policies, for example. Policies is so difficult to implement those correctly. And I can say that because I have a 45-minute talk about policies, and I have it actually tomorrow, so you can also see that one if you're liking this. So the policies is very difficult, and one that I often see that people are putting last. Like, yeah, we still need to do the policies. Or the other way around, they create them all, and yeah, better? Better? Shall I stop shouting? I am glad, because I have had to shout this kind of things before when I did a session, and I was tired afterwards. It's a lot of work to be shouting, so I'm happy that you're doing the sound engineers doing the work for me. So these policies, where were we? We either have too many or too little, and I have found overall that people tend to create them and then think that they can just go on with their day and do other stuff. There's a lot of things going on when we're talking Azure policies. So you need to keep going with them. We can set up baselines for governance. So for governance reasons, especially if you have a company that has to be ISO compliant, ISA compliant, NIS2 compliant, stuff like that. I think there's a NIS2 talk later today somewhere. That's difficult. You have a great governance for that. But it's something that's often forgotten, or something where we think, yeah, but everything is NIS compliant. Yeah, but that's not enough. You have to be able to prove that you are. There's a lot of tools for that. We're going to get to that in a second, because monitoring is in the same level where it's always like, yeah, there's monitoring. All right, who's keeping check of the monitoring? Let's also try that. Who here has the thing where they have set up the monitoring and no one's actually looking at it? Yeah, we have that so often. We do that so often. We set up the monitoring, and I have a screenshot here, because I'm going to dig into my own environment. This is the compliance of my lab environment. I have the policies, but it's a mess. But I guarantee you that half the compliance of half the companies in the world look like this. Because the thing is, the people that know it exists, they don't care about it. And the people that care about it don't know it exists. So we need to find out about it. And one of the important things also to think about is the workloads. Who is responsible for the monitoring and for the alerts? Who is responsible for the backups? This is not something that is defined in the strategy. This is something you need to decide. So you need to have conversations on who is responsible for when it all goes to flames. So that's really difficult. The security parts, often security comes in the place of productivity. So it's also a very difficult part to talk about. So this part can take a whole day as well and keep us all busy. If you want to know more about implementing policies, little self-promotion, but you can find me tomorrow at the final session before the final keynote. We're talking about implementing Azure policies. And then we have everything in place, and we know everything that we're doing, and everything is looking nice, and then we have a strategy, we have designs, and we run into technical limitations. Because I always say, this is how a perfect world looks, but we're not living in a perfect world. We have Azure right here. And Azure is nice, but it has its limitations. One of my favorite examples. So if you have a landing zone, what RBAC rule is logical? So the admin, the one who's the owner, what role would they have? What role do the people have in the landing zones in your companies, or what would you think makes sense? Some guesses? It depends, yes. Very true. But first instinct. Contributor. Makes a lot of sense, right? Because what would the problem be if someone was an owner? If we don't see a problem with owner, then we're going to give everyone owner, right? Now, the problem with the owner is that they can give permissions to other people, and then that is a risk that you're losing track. Another problem of the owner role is that the owner is able to change policies that are on the same scope. So there goes your security. I saw you like that. I'm thinking maybe you're like the evil, like thinking, I am the owner of my landing zone. I must not tell my platform engineers. I will not tell anyone. This stays between the room. So we set up a nice design, and everyone is a contributor because that is safe. And then the first person comes along that says, I want to create data factory. You cannot create a data factory if you don't have owner permissions. It's one of those limitations. And this makes sense because there's 200 services within Azure. So it makes sense that one of these services has these little kind of restrictions on there. The good thing is that the data factory, it means that you only have to help during deployment. They don't need it whenever they're using it just for deployment. So that's the good thing. But this is where you're like, oh, okay, we have a beautiful plan and it's not going to work because of this one limitation. Shall we talk naming convention? I have a, no, don't start. You know how long it takes when I get started about naming convention because I have a 45-minute talk about naming conventions because it's a nightmare. Naming conventions are a nightmare. The biggest limitation is that you cannot rename resources. So you can have a beautiful naming convention, tell everyone that this is the naming convention, and someone's going to be like test tree, and there goes your naming convention, and suddenly test tree is production, and this is your life now. You cannot change the names of resources. It's also pretty much impossible to enforce it through Azure policies, because all this random stuff will break. And then, even if you get everything right, so you tell everyone, if you don't use this naming convention, we will kill a puppy in front of your eyes or something like that, and everyone listens to you, and then Azure makes its own resources. And suddenly you have network watchers everywhere where you're like, no, but I had a naming convention. It's impossible to get the naming convention right. And you want it, but technical limitation. Another one of my favorites that we saw, we had, it was quite a big environment. I think we had 70 workloads on it already. Good as an example, we were still changing stuff in the bigger landing zone. So we really got it structured, let's just go. We had about 70 subscriptions, and then one of the workloads started using Terraform. And we were using, this was some time ago, we were going from ARM templates to Bicep. Terraform, completely fine. We're not going to get into the Terraform Bicep discussion here. No, this is going to take a long time. You need to be back for lunch. But there's one thing about Terraform, and that's the state file. And we were still developing this environment, and every time we would push a change that would somehow influence the landing zones, their state file would go corrupt. So we actually had to go into a process where every time we made a change, we had to warn that specific workload in advance to let them know, we're going to change stuff, and you need to do something about your state file. And States files, love them or hate it, but it's something that we could never have accounted for. You don't think about this kind of stuff when you're creating stuff. And then we have the biggest issue that you can get, and that is people that are like, I don't want a workload. I don't want a piece of Azure. I want an app service, and I want to push my code, and I want the app service to be your problem. The biggest part where you get that is with suppliers. Other people are using, outside of the company, or are using your Azure environment. They will often say, we need a SQL database, a VM, with a far out-of-date server image, and something very inefficient, probably. But they will come in and say, yeah, that's nice that you have workloads and whatever, we just want these resources. A lot of developers are also like, I want to write code, get out of my head, get out of my way, let me just do my thing. And there goes your model. Because your model was about, yeah, everyone will make it work for themselves and we don't have to do anything. You have to have a plan for that. You have to know what you're going to do if something like that happens. What you're going to do if a workload is very willing but needs a lot of help. It's going to take a lot of time, completely fine, but you need to know what to do with it. Basically, it's a journey. It's not a destination. And you think, oh, another inspirational quote. No, this is directly from the Cloud Adoption Framework. This is actually in there. I must say, I don't know if it's in the modern one, but it used to be and it deserves to be here. It's a journey, not a destination. And you can see, I made the picture when AI still did everything wrong. I missed that time, when it was making up letters. Is journey. It got so close. I miss those times. So we're doing this thing, and we've run through the entire cloud adoption framework right here. So we've defined a strategy, we've planned, we've ready, we adopted, and we've secured, managed, and governed. Now what have we learned? Let's get them all back. With the strategy, we have learned this is not about cloud, this is not about the technology, it's about the direction that we're going. When we're planning stuff, we have learned we need to take the time to get this right, not just done, which is kind of the opposite from the next step, by the way. But with planning stuff, need to take that time. Then we ready. Keep being a verb. We launch small, we learn fast, we improve always. Don't get stuck in this and don't create stuff you don't actually need. Do check, how does this fit into your environment? We can adopting and find out one size fits none. And then we secure, manage, and govern stuff. And we find it's a journey, not a destination. This is where I need to be in the picture, right? See people. I'm going to be your inspirational speaker. Now the big question we're going to have, will the Cloud Adoption Framework actually make me as happy? I mean, I just spent 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 53 minutes bashing the Cloud Adoption Framework. Why are we talking about this stuff? This still will make us happy. Yes, we still will need the Cloud Adoption Framework. There's a reason why they created it, and that's because it works. It works as the base. But it goes with the same thing, one size fits none. You need to look at how you can fit it in your own company, because this is a model that's created for every company around the world. And maybe here we're like, oh, 5,000 people in a company, that's a big company, while in the US they are like, okay, we have 20,000 people in our company. Now we might be a little bit into enterprise. No, so it's for all sizes and shapes. So if you have a company with 10 people, you might not need the complete Cloud Adoption Framework. So you need to take it with that grain of salt. But it works. It's proven, it works. It's something that does help if you start with it. It's not a single truth. It's a guide. And that's what it should be. It should be a guide. So if you actually want to read that guide, this is where we can find it. And the good news is, if you are like, those 1,300 pages of documentation is not enough, there's more. There's more that we can do. We have the Cloud Adoption Framework. We also have AI adoption now, because of course we do. I've read very briefly through it, because I'm like, yeah, let's show that I actually need this stuff. It's sort of like the Cloud Adoption Framework, except AI, literally. Of course it is. We have an architecture board where you can find everything about Azure architecture. And there's a lot of images in there, which is actually really helpful. A lot of Visio images you can get from there with the complete design already ready, so you don't have to create it yourself. Really cool. What you also have is the well-architected framework, which is when you already have an Azure environment and how you can run it smoothly. So if you're like, well, 1,300 pages is not going to give me enough information, you can keep going forever. Don't forget to just start with your journey while you're at it. All right, so this is pretty much everything I have. I think I forgot in the beginning my socials. BA4BES is my GitHub handle. It's also my old Twitter handle, but the fact that I still call it Twitter tells you that I don't really use it anymore. I do use LinkedIn, where you can find me, and I still in this one, I see my Blue Sky is on here. I don't do Blue Sky anymore. Does anyone do Blue Sky? No, that's one fan. I want to love it, I just don't. Anyway, you can find me mostly on LinkedIn and on GitHub if you want to find me there. And what I have here, the QR code, is one of my latest Vibe Codes experiments, and you're going to be the first ones to actually use it. So what you can do if you scanned it is give me feedback. So this is not from the organizers. This is a personal vibe coding project, which I'm going to find out now if this is a complete failure or not. So you can still, you have the little papers there that you can put into the bowl, which is very analog. we should create an app for that. But completely fine. So this is where you tell the organizers that I'm awesome and that they need to invite me again next year. So that's where you put all the green stuff in there. But here you can give your honest opinion. No, you can be honest with anything. You can put some stars in there and some comments on improvements, on things you really liked, on whether you enjoyed the show and anything around that. So I would really appreciate it if you could look into that. If anyone is feeling it, I can show the dashboard that Copilot has created for me, but it has nothing to do with this talk, so we'll do it behind the stage. I think we have 3.5 minutes left, which means you can get first in line for lunch, probably, if it's already started. So what I suggest, if anyone has any questions, want to do a conversation, come here to the stage, and everyone who is ready, thank you for being here. Hopefully see you tomorrow, and otherwise enjoy it.